Whether you've bought a new iPhone or you're upgrading to iOS 11, we're going to take a look at some handy tips for you to take advantage of your iPhone. Now, as we go along, there is a handout that you can follow along with in the notes for this video, just down below. So go ahead and open up that link, and that'll give you a handout of all the stuff we're going to talk about with handy links. Now, I'm not going to cover everything in there. I'm also not going to cover all the basics that we found out about our iPhone. So part of the setup, you get your email and your calendar, and Apple does a very good job of that. What I want to do is focus on things that you may not be aware of already, or just some way to take advantage of those things that you are aware of. I got some tips though that I want to start off with. First thing I want you to look at is your phone. On the back of your phone, do you have anything, a label or anything with your name or phone number in it? If you don't, you should. Because quite often what happens is when you lose these things, that's where people will look to see who owns it. And if you've got no power to this phone, it's a lot harder to do that. Whereas if there's something in there, you can always, it's easy for someone to contact you. And that's what you want to do, is make sure it's as easy as possible for someone to get a hold of you to return your device. Now, I'm going to show you a trick a little bit later. You'll notice on the phone here, I've got a QR code. This actually contains my contact information. So when I'm at a conference, I can just take this and have people scan it. It will automatically add their information into their iPhone or their Android device just by scanning the QR code. We'll talk a bit more about that a little later. In the handout that I've given you, there's a couple of resources there. One is from Apple, the iOS 11 book for iPhone. There's also the iPad user guide for iOS 11. I really recommend you take a look at those resources and you go through those links. Now, we all know the iPhone has a flashlight on it, but sometimes you don't want to be using the full flashlight. So what I often will do is I'll turn on my phone. So I'm just going to turn it off for a second, bring it back on. And on the screen there, it's just this lock-in. I can just go and turn my notifications on and just leave that there. The light from that is bright enough to pretty much see what I really need to see without having to turn the flashlight on. If I do need to turn the flashlight on, I can go ahead and do that. I'll show you some tricks later on because you can actually adjust the brightness of that flashlight. But for a lot of people, I just need to turn it on, and the light from the screen source is all I need. I've opened up a note for you guys to take a look at. I want to show you a couple of cool tricks. The first one is quickly entering in a decimal or a period at the end of a sentence. Instead of switching into the number key and then trying to find the punctuation you want, I can just hit the space bar twice. So I'm just going to type in the word the, hit the keyboard space bar twice, and you see a period pop in automatically. That works out really great when you're doing those sentences, and your fingers can quickly fly and catch stuff done. Another cool trick is switching from numbers to letters for just one quick capture. So for example, for Canadian postal code, it's number then letter. So I might do something like T5, T space, then switch to numbers, 6, keyboard, whatever thing. Now I've had to use 2 fingers to do that, but a quicker way to do that, instead of actually just switching, I'm going to type in my number or my letter. I'm going to the number key down at the bottom, the 1, 2, 3, click and hold, and then while your finger's still down on the keyboard, you drag it to the number you want and let go. What it's going to do is select the number you've asked and then quickly change back to your letters. So here I go, I'm holding it down, get to 7, let go, and see I've switched back to back to letters. I can go and do the same the other way, where I'm starting off with a number or letter, click on a letter, hold it down, pick out the letter I want, pick out the other number, just by holding down and sliding that key. Okay, so let's get started on the real nitty-gritty stuff. The first thing I want to show you is about Siri. Siri is a wonderful personal assistant. Siri is here to help make your life a lot easier, but it does involve you getting over your unwillingness to talk in public. However, if you can do that, especially if you're driving, Siri is a wonderful tool. I'm going to give you a couple examples of some stuff of what you can do. In the handout that I've sent you, or I've included, if you go to those links, there's a couple of blog posts that I've done on different commands that you can do with Siri, but I want to show you the handiest ones that that you'll probably make use of the most. So to start off, something very simple like a reminder. Now, when you're trying to initiate Siri, there's a couple ways of doing it. On the newer phones, you just push on the button on the side here and hold that down. That'll enable Siri. You can use the words, hey so-and-so, and that will initiate it. So it just depends on what you're used to. If you start off by saying, hey, Siri, and ask any questions, she will answer out loud. If you hold down the button, you can talk in and give your commands in there, and Siri will not be speaking out loud to you, but still will be able to do something. So for example, I'm just going to hold the button down here. Hey Siri, what's the weather like today? Now Siri's going to display the information on here. If I ask her about it using the command keys, hey Siri, what's the weather like for today?
It's currently partly cloudy and minus 17 degrees in Edmonton. Expect cloudy skies.
So that's the difference. If you can, if you're in your car, great time to make use of it. In the public, you can use it, but just be aware she's going to talk back to you. So let's take a look at some of the things that Siri can do for us. One of the easiest examples is setting a timer. If you go down and you put your laundry in the wash and you need to be reminded after an hour for it to be moved over to the dryer, if you put something on the stove, Siri is great for this kind of stuff. Now keep in mind you can only have one timer. You can have a number of alarms, but only one timer. Hey Siri, set timer for 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes and counting.
And in 5 minutes time, we'll get an alarm going off. If I try and set another timer, she's going to let me know we can't do that. Hey Siri, set a timer for 2 minutes.
A timer is already running at 4 minutes and 47 seconds. Would you like to replace it?
Yes.
Okay, the timer's now running at 2 minutes.
Now, a way you can get around that is you can use alarms. So you can say, set an alarm for 5 o'clock or set an alarm for 30 minutes or something, and Siri will do that. You've already seen examples of how I can ask Siri about weather. I can even ask for Siri about weather in different countries or different cities using the same technique. One thing I use Siri a lot for is reminders. Because I don't want anything in my calendar, I just want to be reminded of something, I can ask Siri. Now the thing to keep in mind is Siri will also not only put the reminder in a list, Siri will also let you know at a certain time or a certain location. So for example, if I'm coming home, I want to make sure I get some meat out of the freezer or something before when I get home, I just remind her when I'm home. Hey Siri, remind me to take the meat out of the freezer when I get home.
Okay, I'll remind you about take the meat out of the freezer when you arrive at home.
Now Siri knows where I live, so that's why it can tell me where I'm arriving. And you can tell Siri your address and that. It usually picks that information out of your contacts. I can also do the same thing for asking information about a particular person. So if I want to ask about my wife, I can say, Siri, tell my wife whatever I want. And it uses that contact information. And we'll talk about that in a second here. So I've shown you how Siri can do a reminder based on a location. I can also use a time. Hey Siri, remind me to check the oil on my car today at 5 p.m.
Okay, I added check the oil on my car to your reminders for today at 5 p.m.
These are handy commands that I use all the time when I'm driving or when I'm walking from one location to another. And you'll often see me on my phone talking to Siri, asking for different pieces of information. Now, while I'm driving, I can also use things like texting and messaging. For example, hey Siri, text Jazz that I'll be home soon.
Your message to Jazz Hayward says, I'll be home soon. Ready to send it?
Send.
I'll send it.
Now it will send that email or send that text off to Jazz, and that way she will get that and I don't have to touch anything. When I get a message from Jazz, I can also ask Siri to read it back by saying, hey Siri, read last message from Jazz.
There are no recent messages from Jazz.
But anytime I get a message from Jazz or anytime I get any message, I can ask Siri to read those back to me. I can also send emails. Now I can basically say, hey Siri, send an email, and it will walk me through all the steps. But a nicer way to do it is give it all the information it needs at once. So for example, the basic layout of the emails is the subject line is regarding, the content is about. So if I wanted an email to somebody and I want the subject line to say dog food and my message in the body, I would say something like this. Hey Siri, send an email to Jazz regarding dog food and say, I'll pick some up on the way home, period. What flavor would you like? Question mark.
Here's your message to Jazz Hayward. It says, I'll pick some up.
Now notice that the subject line's already been filled out. Now notice the subject line has already been filled out, as well as the message, as well as who it's to. So it's really important that you understand the syntax of it is first who's to, regarding is the subject line, and about is the message. The trick though to notice what or know what to say is in the bottom left-hand corner after you've enabled Siri. Do you see the question mark there? So well, when I click on that question mark, here it brings up all the different things that Siri can be used for. So for example, I'm going to go into my messages and I click on messages or tap messages, and there's all the different sample things that I can do. There's read my message, read it again, how to respond, caller, Facebook. So all the different things that Siri can do, you can find that in there. So I really recommend going through, take a look at the different apps to see what it is that you want to do and what might be handy for you. One thing I find handy for using Siri is to find my car, especially when I'm doing some traveling down in the States. If I connect my phone to an FM transmitter or Bluetooth transmitter in the car, Siri will often remember where I've parked without my having to say anything. If I have an older car that doesn't have a Bluetooth connection, I can just say, hey Siri, remember where I parked, and it will remember when I parked. Here's an example of something I've actually put in a location of where I want it to be, and there's my parked car. So anytime I'm lost, I'm trying to find something, I can open up Apple Maps and I can see the parked car icon shows up right away. The other thing I can do is I can ask Siri for directions. So I'm going to just close off my screen for a second, bring it back open. Hey Siri, give me directions to where I parked my car.
Getting directions to their parked car.
And Siri will now be able to show me how to get there. Really handy. You just have to remember when you get out of your car, remind me where I parked. A lot of us spend a lot of time in messages, and so it's kind of handy to find out what exactly extras that we can do with that. I'm going to just quickly type in a quick message. Now what I'm about to show you only works between Apple devices, so iPhone to iPads, iPhone to iPhone, that kind of thing. But do you see off to the right where there's the arrow pointing up? If I click and hold on that arrow, it gives me some different effects that I can send off. So just going to tap my finger here on each one, and you'll see the different effects that show up. This is what the other person's going to see when they go to open your message. So you notice how the size of these things change. The invisible ink one, the person actually has to start wiping away the message in order for it to appear. So you see all those sparkles in there. They just have to wipe it away, which is really good when you want to send something sensitive and you don't want necessarily everyone to see it if that happens to pop up on a screen. So those are the bubble effects. Up at the top, you'll see there's something called screen. Those are background effects. Now, to change between these different background effects, you see at the bottom all those little dots, we just have to swipe to the right. So this one is an echo. There's the spotlight on the thing, which I find quite useless. Balloons are always nice, especially when you're sending happy birthdays and messages. Hearts, confettis, lasers, because everyone likes lasers. And of course, fireworks. So those kind of effects are kind of handy to have that when you want to send off your messages to different people. You can also send from the camera there. I can look at my camera and send a picture. I can access my photo albums and stuff. But do you see the A there? The A there is apps. It means that there's different apps that we can add to use. Now, if one of the ones that everyone likes to send is Jiffies. So there's an app from the App Store that you can download, and it'll allow you to get into the Jiffies. And you can just search straight from there without having to go into any kind of Jiffy app or website. I just tap on the one I want, and there it gets entered, and I just hit send, and that message will get sent off. Find My Friends is a great app for sharing your location or for others to share their location with you. Unfortunately, they all have to be within the Apple ecosystem for it to work, but if you're already an Apple family, it works out wonderful. It's a great way to keep track of where your kids are or where your spouse is. So the Within the Find My Friends app, you can go in and add different users that you want to share your location with. You can say you only want to share the location for an hour, or for a day, or for forever. Can be a really handy trick when you're out for the day with friends and you just want to make sure that when you're at the mall, as everyone goes their separate ways, you can keep track of each other, or with your family or whatever else. I use it quite a lot for that kind of things. I also share it with my wife and Johnny5, which is a account that I've created on a permanent basis. So anytime I want, I can go in and I can find out where they are. So I'm going to go in here and we can see the location of the different people in there and where they're at and my distance. When I want, I can go in, select one of those users, and then I can get directions to where they are. Siri is also really good at that because Siri will help me and tell me where those people are. So I'm just going to go from my lock screen and I'm going to say, hey Siri, where's Johnny5?
Here's Johnny 5.
And Siri will give me a general direction. I can see that Johnny5 is downtown. If I want more information, I just tap on the screen. And there's Johnny5's actual location, which is somewhere on the MacEwan University campus. Another handy part about this is at the very top of the screen, you see where it says notify me. When I tap on that, I can say, hey, let me know when Johnny is going to be leaving that location or when he's going to arrive at a different location. Quite often, I will use that with my wife because I want to know just before she gets home for the day and make sure that I get stuff cleaned up before she actually walks through the door. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is widgets, control panel, and control center and notifications. So widgets basically are pieces of information that are provided to you from applications you've already installed on your phone. The best way to get access to them from the lock screen or from any page you're on when you're inside your browser, or sorry, inside your phone. So I'm going to start off with accessing it on your screen here from the lock screen. I just swipe to the right and there I get all these pieces of information that I want from these different apps that I have installed. Now, to find out what apps or what widgets you have available, if you go down to the bottom where it says edit, just click on that. It'll show you a list of all the different widgets you've installed, all the widgets that are available for you. So each of these pieces of apps, I could actually install and have that information on there, but I don't want to. I can also go through and quickly pick the ones I don't want. So Google Assistant, I'm going to get rid of that because it's kind of useless. And then same thing with the Google Keep. I like that one, but I'm just going to move it down to the bottom there. So widgets is pretty straightforward. Just take a look at what you've got available to you from the apps you've installed. And as you install new apps, go back every once in a while and check whatever's there. The nice thing about it is I don't have to actually start up, open my phone and go into it to get this information. So for example, if I want to find out what's on my calendar for tomorrow, which I have two calendars because one's for work and one's for home. But there I can see I've got these different things that I've got available that I have to do. Control Center allows us to basically take control of different little apps that we have available. Now, for most people, if you don't have an iPhone 10, you just swipe up. For those of us that have iPhone 10s, you swipe from the top right corner. These are the different control center. Now, you may not have everything in here that I have because you can add different items to it. So we'll take a look at that first real quickly. So I'm just going to log in and go into my settings, go down to Control Center. Can you access this within apps? That means once you're inside, not just the lock-in screen, but once you're inside apps and stuff. Yes, I can. And that's, for me, it's just to pull down from the top right. But let's look at our controls here. So here are the different controls from Control Center that I can add in. So I've got a bunch here that I could throw in there. We've got guided access, do not disturb, that kind of thing. I've added a bunch of these items in here. So I have my flashlight, cameras, all that kind of stuff. Now let's go back to my lock screen for a moment, and I'll bring it up again. Now you may say, well, Trevor, how come you have the camera and the flashlight there? Those are already available on the front screen. And yes, that's true, they are. However, there's some extra little things you can do from the control panel. So for example, you can see where I can control my brightness, goes up and down. Same thing with the volume, I can do all that. I can do that with my flashlight. If I click and press hard on it, it actually allows me different levels of brightness. See if you can see it on the screen. that I can make use of. That'll be the setting for the next time I use my flashlight. Same thing with the camera. If I press and hold, I can go and take selfie, do all these things here. It's a lot harder, or sorry, it's a lot easier picking that there than trying to go into the camera app and then move along these items here with this finger. Just a bigger space for you to pick and choose and get to the stuff. So I like that command, or I like that, for instance, a lot better. One of the things that I really recommend for everyone to take a look at is the record your screen. And that's that little button down at the bottom right with the circles and stuff. Because I'm recording this now, I'm not going to enable it right away. But what happens is if I click on that, it will record all of the stuff that I do on my screen. Great for doing tutorials when you have to send it to someone else about what you're doing on your iPhone. The other thing to keep in mind, wish my screen would stop that, if I click and hold and press down, right now I'm using TechSmith to record, but you can turn the microphone audio on or off. So that's important to make sure you check that out when you're doing a tutorial for someone, that you've got the audio running, and that's how you would turn that on. There's a bunch of other cool things you can do and add. One I like is accessibility, because late at night or early in the morning, rather than having that bright light flashing in my eyes, I can do what's called inversion, which basically means the white stuff becomes darker, the dark stuff becomes white. And the smart invert is a really nice way that even when I'm driving or something like that, and my screen happens to come on, it's not going to be super bright. Changes the colors a little bit, so remember to flip that back, otherwise you'll be freaking out. Why is that doing that? But it works really well. The other things I love is in the bottom left-hand corner is the magnifying glass. For those of us that our eyesights are starting to go, it's great, because what I can do with it, it takes a picture. I can actually zoom in and out. It's taking a full screen picture, but it's taking a really high quality resolution picture. So I can really zoom in to catch the ID numbers. Great for pill bottles and stuff when you're trying to read the prescriptions on the side of the boxes and stuff. You can also go through and add different effects. So sometimes you might find that a white blue is easier to read, or yellow. I'm a grayscale guy because it really brings out the blacks and the whites. One thing I'm just going to show you, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, is notifications. So these are the apps that bring up and put in the little banners or whatever on your screen. You can go through and choose what notifications you want to show up. Sometimes it's kind of silly, like here's Alien Shooter. Why is it sending me a location or a little banner or something like that, and the badges or whatever? So go through, you can turn the ones you don't want off, turn on the ones you want. You can decide when you do turn something on, do you want it to show up as a temporary? So down at the bottom here it says show as a banner. Do you want it just to temporarily pop up, keep up there until I actually do something with it? Do you want it to show up on your lock screen? You can do that for each of the individual app. Go through and select what you want for the notifications there. So while we're in settings, let's take a look at emergency SOS. This is something everyone should be aware of. I'm surprised that Apple doesn't do a little bit more to promote this, but this allows your phone to actually make emergency phone calls for you when you're in trouble. So first of all, I'm just going to demonstrate how it works. There's two ways to do it. You can either do 5 presses on the right hand side, or you can press and hold your power button and your one of the volume buttons. So I'm going to do that one first. So I'm going to click and hold that one here and let go. Now what happens is it brings up this screen. So this is how I'd also power off my machine. I can also use this, or be used by ambulance emergency technicians. They can come in and get my medical ID information, or I can do emergency SOS. When I tap that, it's going to automatically start calling 911. So it's important that you realize that. While it's doing that, it's also going to send a message to people that you've identified in your emergency contacts that, hey, Trevor has called or has enabled the emergency SOS. There's a phone call right now going through. Here's his location. So it'll actually send out a GPS location, and it'll text that message to the person. So for sometimes when you're in trouble, you can go ahead and do that. The other thing it does is it turns off your ID, your automatic ID. So you have to enter in a passcode. So people who are kind of wary about traveling and going into the States and afraid that they have to give up their thumbprint or their Face ID to open it up, before you land, you just do that. You don't have to do anything else, just cancel. But Face ID and Touch ID are now disabled, and the only way to enter into your phone is to put in a passcode, which by law you cannot give up. So if you're interested, that's a kind of a handy way to ensure that that stuff's turned off. You can also get to this and do an emergency SOS by pressing 5 times. Now I'm just going to go back into our settings here for a moment. So remember I told you before that I had to disable this, or it was disabled. Now I have to enable it. I'm not going to show you what my passcode is, so just bear with me and I'll open it up. So let's go back into emergency SOS. So keep and press the 2, call with the side button. You can do it 5 times, and pressing and holding that will continue to work as well. You can also use auto call. So after you specify a service, it'll dial that 911 thing. It'll also send the emergency contact information here. Now you can enter that emergency contacts in your health app. That's also where you put your information about yourself that you want to do, information about yourself, you know, your weight, your height, allergies, that kind of stuff. With iOS 11, QR codes are now automatically recognized. Now people will say, oh Trevor, QR codes are so yesterday and no one ever uses them anymore. But you know what? They actually are very valuable if you had the chance to use them. Unfortunately, the iPhone never had the opportunity to use QR codes, so you were kind of stuck with something that you had to manually find an app and blah, blah, blah. Now everything's built into the phone. So here's a couple of examples of some QR codes. I'm going to show you what happens when I take my phone and scan it on there. So open up my app program. I'm just going to go down to this first QR code here and notice what it says. Up at the top there, open this up on this web page. So I'm going to go there. I've actually created a piece of text with a link, and that's the QR code. So think of this for use cases like things like instructions on how to operate a piece of equipment, or perhaps here's some background information on an auction item that you have available. The person can quickly scan, get all this information and work with that. Let's see what else we can do. Here's John Wayne's contact information. Using a QR code generator, and I've got a link in the document, you can go and add all this stuff in. What's cool is now that all that data is stored in this QR code, and when you go and hit save, that automatically gets entered into your address book. Now, remember I told you before that I have my phone set up with a QR code? Same thing. So whenever I'm at a conference or something, someone can just scan that. No one has to enter any information in. I don't have to remember to email someone my contact information. It automatically gets saved to the person's address book. So QR codes, I think, are going to make a bit of a comeback. That's my prediction. You've heard it here. A nice handy piece of using the QR code is joining networks. So at home, I have a network potentially called My Little Pony. I don't, but let's pretend we do. But I have this thing here. If I click on that, the network information is all stored in there. So not only the name of the network, but the password. This is great when I have company coming over, because what I'll do is I have the QR code there. And when people say, hey, what's the network information and password to get on? I just say, scan this in. They scan it, bang, it's automatically added into the network. Very cool piece of technology. The Notes app has a lot more functionality than it ever did before, and it's actually one that I'm using more and more all the time. So first of all, Siri can actually do more with the Notes app. I can go in and I can add stuff into a specific note. So you saw earlier how I had a note called test. I can add information to that specific note through Siri. So when I'm walking along and I'm brainstorming quite often, I will use Siri to do that. So for example, hey Siri, add how do I find cats to my test note.
Okay, I added how do I find cats to your note test.
So there it goes. It's throwing it into that new note here. Now, the other thing though, if you take a look at the bottom, I have some cool new tools. We're always looking for a sketch pad. Well, Apple has now included different tools for doing that. So I can make my little sketches here using different tools. I can change colors, and it's going to save it within this specific note. One of the other things that I can do after I hit done is it can be a scanner. Now we've all had that option, or that we've all had that situation where there's a document that we need to scan in to and save a copy of it? Well, I can do that within my notes. Apple's pretty good about identifying where the document starts and where the desk ends. So it's gone in and already highlighted stuff. I can change that, but this is a pretty good one. So I'm going to keep my scan. I can then go on for the next scan, whatever the next document it is I want to scan. Once I'm done, I just hit save in the bottom right-hand corner, and that scan is now part of my test notes. So that's pretty much what I want to cover today. It's given you some ideas of some of the things that you can explore and learn from. There's all sorts of wonderful tools that Apple has given us. We just need to be aware of them, and that was what I was trying to do today. I'll remind you again, take a look at the document that's down in the description for this video. Go through that. There's all sorts of wonderful links there that you can make use of, give you more information, and there's other pieces of information that I didn't cover in this video available there as well.